I'm Allie. Join me as I show you how to work with some wire and some tips and techniques and tricks when you're trying to make things match and you're doing a lot of chain link. If you need any supplies like your wire or your pearls or a beautiful Claspgarten clasp, go ahead and look below the video. In the description, we'll get links back to our website. So hit the little show more button. Gather up your materials and your tools and let's get started. All right, so we're going to learn how to do some chain link. I have this gorgeous Claspgarten clasp that I've been eyeing up, and I just want to make a really simple bracelet to go around where the clasp really shines. You can do this for multiple strands, 1 strand, 2 strand, 3 strands. As you get more strands, you're going to want to make sure that your coiled eye pins that you're creating are nice and even because you want it to sit the same distance as you wear it on your bracelet. I'm going to put my clasp to the side now, and we're going to talk wire. So this one here is 20 gauge, dead soft, round wire in the gold color. It has a copper base, and it is a 20 gauge wire, which is perfect to use for ear wires, perfect to hold its shape that you don't need to coil. It's going to be thicker than, say, 24 gauge, which here's a 24 gauge wire to show you in the silver. So it's thinner as the number gets higher. And then you can get even more so when you get into some of the thicker wires here. Let me grab, I had a 16 gauge wire, so it gets thicker. I'm going to be using the 20 gauge because I like the way that it looks and I want to be able to coil and hold. If I'm using anything smaller than 20 gauge, so say 22, 24, I absolutely do the coils rather than just a turned over loop. I'm using 6mm pearls for this, and I 3 pliers sitting here in addition to my wire. I have a needle nose plier, I have a wire cutter, and I have a round nose plier. The first thing I'm going to do is determine what size I want my loops to be, and I also have sitting handy a pen. This is how you're going to get good at creating those loops. I'm going to look and practice the size loops that I want to make. And once I establish what size loop, we're going to grab our Sharpie marker here so we can go in and create that loop consistently the same size for our bracelet. So when I look at it, all of those links match up in size. From here, what we're going to do is we are going to take our 20 gauge wire and we are going to cut it into pieces and off the spool. I have here about 12 inches and I'm going to cut it down to 6 while I'm getting started and learning how to create. I have my 20 gauge here. I'm going to straighten it out as I'm working with it. The first thing we're going to learn how to do is a coiled eye pin. The coiled eye pin we want to leave about a 1/2 inch after the wire here, and we are going to grab our needle nose plier, hold our wire below our pliers, and we are going to hold here and turn our wire back 90 degrees and make a 90-degree bend in our wire. This is more wire than we need, but this allows us to have a little bit more that we can waste and not poke ourselves while we're learning. After doing the 90-degree turn, we are going to go in and hold with our round nose pliers. The round nose pliers are going to have the shorter piece of wire coming straight out from your chest, and you're going to be able to see both jaws lined up with your eyes here, both jaws of those round nose pliers. Depending on where you hold on the round nose plier is going to determine the size of the loop. The further back you hold, the bigger the loop since the jaw gets bigger as you get closer to those hinges near your hand. I'm going to hold around the middle here, the longer piece coming straight down from my body, running perpendicular or parallel to my body, and then that piece of wire, the short one, perpendicular straight out from my chest. I'm going to take the wire over the top of the round nose pliers till it hits the wire on the opposite side. Once it hits the wire on the opposite side, I want you to take it from the top jaw of the pliers to the bottom jaw. Notice how I've rotated my hands rather than actually physically taking it off the top jaw and moving it to the bottom jaw. Either way works. The main thing that you want to keep track of and realize is that you want your loop that you've created here to sit as far back as it can, meaning right at the loop size that you created. If you hold out further like this and there's some space in the loop you created, you can alter the shape of the loop. Going back in, that wire came over the top. I switch from the top jaw to the bottom jaw, rotating my pliers. And then I'm going to take that short piece of wire and go back to my 90-degree turn. I started at 90, and I'm ending at 90. That is going to make my eye pin. If you want to, you can cut off the extra wire here of the eye pin right inside the loop. We instead are going to coil our eye pin. To coil our eye pin, we're going to let the wire lay down flat, and we are going to let the short piece stick straight up. I like to call this my man laying in bed. His scarf is sticking straight up. I'm going to hold with my needle nose pliers from his nose up to his head. I'm going to take this scarf and I'm going to wrap it 3 times, 1, 2, and 3 around the neck of his body here. With your wire cutter, flat side facing down towards the project, V side sitting up, you're going to cut as close as you can to the last coil, covering your hand as you do so the little pieces don't fly out. If you notice while you're bending that your eye pin got bent a little bit, no problem, just go back into your round nose pliers where it stops and straighten it out. That is how you make an eye pin. This is a coiled eye pin, and we're going to be doing the same thing on the other side. Now you'll notice my eye pins for my sample piece are a little bit bigger because I held further back on my round nose plier. I'm going to put that loop in to get the size that I want to. Take my Sharpie, which will come off with an rubbing alcohol pad if you need to, and I'm just going to mark exactly where I'm holding it throughout the round nose pliers themselves. That way, every time I make the loop, my loops of my eye pin and my coiled eye pin are consistent. It's going to be very important that your loops are consistent as you're working with them. After you have one of your coiled eye pins, and you can watch this video over and over if you need to, you're going to put on one of your beads. I'm using 6mm glass pearls to match the glass pearl in my Claspgarten clasp. I'm going to drop that pearl down next to the coils and hold above the pearl and mimic the same thing I did below with that coiled eye pin above. Holding the pearl and pushing it down next to the coils, I'm going to hold my wire and I'm going to once again bend the pliers back 90 degrees, only leaving enough space that I can see to do the coils above the pearl. Hold where you did previously and go over the top of the round nose pliers till it touches the bead on the opposite side. Switch from the top jaw to the bottom jaw. Now remember, my loops are not as big on this one, and then I'm going to go back 90 degrees behind. Rather than starting to coil, you can kind of take this and make it straight if you need to. You're going to let the guy lay down in bed, holding from his nose up to his head. And this time I always joke, he's gotten married, he's gained a little bit of weight, and we're still going to take that scarf and we're going to wrap it around his neck 3 times, matching the coils from one side to the other. Once those coils are established, you're going to take your plier and cut down as close as you can next to the coil. We have extra remaining wire here, and we're going to do the same thing again. Going in, turning our wire 90 degrees, going in with our round nose pliers, taking that shorter piece of wire over top till it hits on the opposite side, switching from the top jaw to the bottom jaw, and taking the shorter piece back into the side to a matching 90-degree angle. This time, prior to coiling, I need to put the coil or the loops together. So what I'm going to do is just open that up a little bit, and you can usually hear that little bit of a click. You're clicking the loops inside of one another. As you click those loops inside of one another here, they are going to sit just right beside. It gets a little tight to coil the scarf and to hold from the nose up, so you may want to grab with your round nose pliers. As you grab with your round nose plier, you're going to take that shorter piece of wire and once again coil around. If it's getting too short, you can grab your needle nose plier if you need to and coil around, or even position your needle nose plier along the piece, flattening out as you go along. Once you have that nice and down into those 2, and you can see this one I left less as not to waste any, you're going to take your next pearl and put it on to your wire. As you put your pearl onto your wire, you're doing the exact same thing above, making sure again that your loops are consistent from one to the next. This is especially important when you're doing a project like we're going to do here, connecting to a clasp, and you need your strands to match in length so it sits correctly on the design. Grab that coiled eye pin, 1, 2, and 3 loops, cut off the extra, and continue to go as you're working with it. As you build your chains here, you're going to be cognizant and aware of when you're getting close to being done at the end. To be done at the end, we need both sides of our coiled links to attach to our clasp. As you're going in and your chain's getting longer and you're ready to go in and clasp and join it together, I attached with my coiled eye pin there a piece of wire to the opposite end and attached one to the one here as well. When I go in, I'm going to put my pearl on. I'm going to do my coiled eye pin, this time because it's part of mine, going to that loop size, around the top, switch from top jaw to bottom jaw, link in my second strand here of my pearls, again having made sure that I was consistent along the way, so I have a consistent amount of 2.5 loops, and it matches from one strand to the other. As I go in and go along the project and coil, I can also take my needle nose pliers and kind of press down on that little tail or that end. I now have my 2 strands here, and what you want to look at is where they end. If they don't end exactly matching, what you need to do is make up for that as you go in and create your last coiled link. I have my wire here, and I'm going to go in and cut enough to do both of my coiled eye pins. I'm going to take my clasp off there, and I'm going to go into the opposite side here and get ready to do my clasp. I want to put the clasp so I make sure that I'm not by accident flipping it over and that I am in fact connecting it the right way. The worst thing is when you connect your clasp and then realize somewhere in the middle your bracelet has to twist because the clasp is sitting incorrect. I'm going to go in here and do the same thing, doing my coiled eye pin along the end. And the way to make up any difference in length is just to make the eye pin before the clasp a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. You want to do that further in, right at the connection one rather than at the clasp here, because you'll notice it less than if you're using a different size loop at the clasp itself. You can see how I slid it into that loop on the clasp, went in, did my coils, cut off my extra wire, put on my second to last pearl here. After I put on this pearl, and whenever you have pearls, if you have trouble getting them on because the wire's bent a little bit, you want to spin your beads. Don't kind of push down. You want to spin as you push, so that way you don't risk breaking any glass or gemstone beads. Here at the end, we're going to go in and do the same thing, turning to the side, going over the top to create your loop, switching from the top jaw to the bottom jaw, lining up to see exactly which side of the clasp is which. I'm going to grab onto that one, slide those loops into one another, hold that loop off to the side, and coil my 3 coils. Go in here and cut off the extra wire. Taking my needle nose plier then and just going in and pinching that wire down. That's also the very last quality control check that you'll do, is make sure all of those wires are pinched down. You're also going to want to take your chain, round it out there, and make sure that your eye pins, when you're looking at them, if they need to turn, that they're facing the same direction. You want to look at the eye pins and see both of the loops sitting in the same direction from the end. I have one more loop to make to connect these beads together, and when you look at them and see the connection point, if you're using the same size beads, you should have the same amount of beads on your piece. So when you're looking at, you can kind of figure out if you're matched up. From here, same thing, going in, take your plier here, turn to the side, make your loop right along the line, over the top, switch from the top jaw to the bottom jaw, go on in, attach to the clasp. If I need it to be a little bit smaller, that loop can be a little bit smaller there, or a little bit bigger, the loop can be a little bit bigger to make up for any difference in length. The more coils you have and the more links you have, the easier or harder it is to go in and to make them fit. So the more links, the easier it is to make it fit. The less links, you need them to be more accurate. Putting that last bead on there, going in here, one more time, turning to the side, making your loop the same size over the top, switch from the top jaw to the bottom jaw, take that wire back 90 degrees, find your loop there, click into the loop, hold it off to the side here, and coil that extra wire. There are such pretty Claspgarten clasps that you can take a look at to create this design. Again, there's many that I wanted to use doing a smaller design that have 24 gauge kind of bound, that when you're looking at it, I love this little one here that has all the little pearls along the edge. Having 4 strands there, 4mm pearls would work wonderfully. So don't limit yourself to just this clasp. Once your chain link is finished there, you can kind of test it out. Make sure when you're going and looking at it that you don't have any spikes sticking out, that everything's linked the same. Go ahead in then and close up your pearl link clasp and hear that nice Claspgarten click. There you have the multi-strand row of your chain link pearl bracelet with this beautiful clasp. I hope when watching this, you learned a lot of techniques and a lot of good tips to help you in creating some of your own chain link jewelry. Thanks so much for joining me in creating this pearl multi-strand chain link bracelet. Again, you can go from the bracelet to a necklace to a multi-strand, from 2 to 4, and really play along with your wire skills, not only using pearls, but also using gemstones, even seed beads if you want to. I love the look of the little tiny gemstones, the 2s and the 3s, done with this coil link as well. So check out your clasp that match. Remember, if you need any materials, look in the video description. There's that little show more button. You can click on that, and that'll expand so that way you can get back to our website and check out what we've got for you to use with this awesome technique design. If you haven't yet as well, post your pictures in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. We would love to see more wire there. As always, thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.